Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. Organized team activities continued this week, but took a backseat to other Browns news. Nick Chubb talked to reporters for the first time since his knee injury last year. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry signed contract extensions, and the team held its annual charity golf outing. Here to discuss, as always, is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. What's going on, Chud?
Scott, last day of school for my girls
Oh,
today. And that as an adult makes me feel like it's like the last day of something. I don't know. It's always an exciting time. Summer here. So pretty excited about that. Taking tomorrow off. So can't go wrong with that. But I know that you have been very busy. I mean, yesterday, what a day on the Browns beat to have, both of those things happen in one day. It's like all or nothing, right? You have nothing one day and then all that. But that's the way it works. I'm trying to decide what do you think is a bigger deal? And the reason I ask this is I would say the extensions are a huge deal in the big picture. The extensions are a big deal, but in the small picture, it's like I kind of feel like we figured or knew it was coming,
yeah.
so it was just a matter of when, right? But the fact that it's the first time in forever it's happened, that makes it a big deal. But then with Chubb, it's like, well, a player interview really wouldn't be that huge of a deal. But since it's the first time we heard from him since he got hurt and you get a lot of news out of it, it's like, where do you go? Where do you go first here? I'm going to let you decide.
Sean, it's so funny you say that. I send these emails to the desks, right? We still do newspapers saying, "Hey, here's what I got coming today." And there's oftentimes I'll go main and notes or call it main and sidebar notes. And yesterday I sent the email and I said main number one and main number two, and my boss texted me and goes, "All right, well, which one's more important? Because I might only be able to get one on the front page of the newspaper or the sports section." And I said, "Well, I said it's a tough question. I said extensions have bigger long-term impact, but we knew they were coming. Chubb is a big deal, hasn't talked. I think I'd go Chubb." So it's close, but I think Nick Chubb just given the fact we hadn't talked to him since the injury. He's such a popular player. He's such a good player, and there was a feeling of inevitability about those extensions. So I would say let's talk about Nick Chubb.
Well, it's funny you say that because when I got in this morning, they already had the rundown set. We always do sports in the morning show. Not
Yeah.
always, if there's like, well, let's put it this way. We always do it unless there's just some crazy news story that just takes like the whole morning away. Or, I mean, with stories like this, we're always going to have it in, right?
Yeah.
And we had both of them in, and they had the contracts first. And my first instinct when I got in, I'm like, the contract's a big deal, but I almost feel like let's go Chubb first because I don't know. I feel like there's more meat to it, and it's just the first time he's talking it. But then I ended up just saying, all right, just leave it the way it is. Because I didn't want to mess up the rundown and how they had it. And you know, sometimes it doesn't matter what comes first because if you do the second thing second, I was able to then talk about
Yep.
the Chubb thing. So if that makes sense. So on TV, we actually went extensions first, but then we talked more about Chubb and actually had Chubb sound because in sound I mean we heard from him, right?
Right. Right.
So I don't know. I don't know if people listening even care about this stuff, but I think it's interesting the behind the scenes of how we think of things and make it work. But I guess the bottom line is we're kind of thinking along the same way there.
Yeah. No doubt. And it for Chubb probably has a bigger impact. I don't think there's a probably. Well, I guess depending on how he comes back from an injury. But like we knew Stefanski and Barry were going to be here this year, right? The fact that they have an extension probably has minimal impact on the 2024 season, right? But Chubb does. Chubb could have a huge impact on this season. If when he comes back, how's he look when he comes back, all those things. So I do think there's an urgency about the Chubb story. We don't know all the answers yet, and we'll get into that. And the other part of it is he is so popular, and you know that as well as anybody, right? But I took a picture just because we hadn't seen him in practice. I saw him at the golf outing on Monday, the charity golf outing at Westwood Country Club in River. He just drove by in a golf cart. The first time I'd seen it, I saw him walking around the locker room last year after the surgeries. He'd be on crutches and you see him walking, but hadn't talked to him. So, and I hadn't seen him this offseason at all. I saw him at the golf outing just for a second. He drove by in a cart. And then we're watching practice yesterday, and he's there watching practice. And he had not been out there the previous 2 weeks when we had been out there. So I just took a picture of him standing there in a sweatshirt. And all these people on X were, just whatever. His reaction to it because it's Nick Chubb. So I think it is Chubb. And, he didn't give us a lot of clarity on the rehab, right? He said he's where he wants to be. But I asked him specifically, do you have a time in mind when you're going to be back on the field for practice or games? And he said, no. Adding, but I'm right where I feel I need to be. I asked him if he was confident that he would get back to being the player he was. And he said he's not even thinking about that, right? So if you're a fan looking for like a real optimism, from Chubb, like, hey, I'm going to be better than I ever have been. I'll be out there the first day of training camp. Like, that wasn't coming. And we probably shouldn't have expected it because, number one, it's such a serious injury and you have to proceed with caution. But more importantly, in my opinion, is that's not who Nick Chubb is, right? Like, I'm not sure if Nick Chubb were completely healthy, he would give you I'm going to be the same player, right? So I guess that was to be expected. I just thought those were the questions that needed to be asked is, where are you on this rehab? What do you foresee in the future? And he just said, I feel good with where I'm at. It's a day-by-day thing. And he didn't go beyond that in those regards.
Give me body language. We can read the headlines, we can read the articles, we can listen to what he said. Give me the Scott Petrak inside of, just kind of how he expressed himself, how he looked to you. I know you can't break down an injury by just looking at a guy, but you know what I mean? Like, just give me how you kind of felt being around him.
Yeah. I'll tell you, first, from a tangible thing, you could see the scars on his knee, right? Because he was wearing shorts, and I was on the left side of him. Scar on the side, scar on the top. Now, I don't know which is from this surgery and which is from the surgery or surgeries. He had 2 this time. And the surgery he had in when he was at Georgia, right, on the same knee. But you saw that. The picture I took from behind, I didn't notice just standing there. Somebody commented on the left leg didn't look as strong as the right leg. And that's normal when you're coming off major surgery. So I think he has some work to do, Chud. And he would admit that, right? He's only been running for a couple of months now. Probably not even 2 months he's been running. But I kind of got I would say, cautious optimism from him. Like I said, he didn't want to get ahead of himself, and I completely understand that. But, somebody asked him if it ever crossed his mind that he wasn't going to play again. And he said it never crossed his mind. But and I'm kind of stumbling here. I thought he gave a pretty insightful interview. Now, there weren't I didn't think there were any great quotes, but he did talk about the emotional toll it took and asking why again, right? It's the second major injury he's had, both to the left knee. Why again? And then he said, I asked that, but then I got to the point where, and I'm paraphrasing, but where this is part of my story, right? So why again? But it's part of my story. He said it never crossed his mind that he wouldn't play again, but it was only when he started running that he started thinking, okay, I'm going to play football again, right? Not like I'm going to play again, but okay, like now I can focus on playing again, right? So I think this was a really emotional journey, and he doesn't, we know Nick Chubb, he doesn't open up a lot to the media. He doesn't open up a lot, period. So I don't think we're ever going to get a really deep dive personally. So, but I think he did give us enough that you could draw some conclusions. And the why again, I thought was pretty insightful. That, when he thought, okay, let's let's focus on football because he could run again. And he said that's when, like, he didn't use depression, but the mental toll that he said that's when it started to flip, right? Because he said it bothered him for a long time. He said the first 2 weeks were blurry. He goes, then it was still bothering him for a long time that he was having to go through this. But when he started to run, he was able to kind of see that light at the end of the tunnel. And then even having gone through this with the left knee before at Georgia, yet he asks the why again, right? And it's got to be tough to go through that in the same knee, and the knee's been beat up, twice with huge injuries. But he also took solace in the fact that he's been through that, so he knows exactly what it takes. He knows what the rehab is like. And on one hand, that's good because he's done it before. He knows he can do it again. On the other hand, he knows exactly how taxing that can be, and that it's every day for months and months. And sometimes you don't see that light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes you don't see that progress. So he had all these thoughts kind of going through his head. So I did think we had some insight into this long journey that's been really difficult for him.
Yeah, I listened to the whole interview, and I got to be honest, I agree with you. There wasn't any major everything you explained. I agree with what you're saying, but I thought that he handled all the questions. Like there are some questions where sometimes these athletes might get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like there was any frustration. I thought he handled the interview really well and was insightful, and I got to give him credit, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'd agree. And, he's an interesting dude, right? And just from a media perspective, like he doesn't give a lot of one-on-ones. He doesn't even like when he does his, he goes to the podium and he gives you some good answers. Like if you ask the right kind of question or if he wants to talk about something, he gives you better quotes than you would think, right? Because you can tell he doesn't like doing it, and he usually keeps the answers short. But if you try to approach him away from the podium, like you're usually not going to have success with it. So I just don't think he likes doing it, which is fine. And he does his obligations, he follows his contract, so I have no issue with that at all. But I just don't think he enjoys it. But I thought it was interesting at the end of the thing, and you're right, he answered all the questions. I think he went for 11 minutes, and that's a long interview for Nick Chubb. And at the end, the reporter's like, "Oh, thanks, Nick," or "Good seeing you," or whatever, And he's walking away, and he walked by me, and he's just kind of under his breath. He's like, "It's good seeing you guys too," or like I think he actually he had a kind of a response, right? It's nice seeing you guys too, and I appreciate you or whatever, which you normally don't get when he leaves an interview. But it had been a long time, right? I mean, the injury happened September 18th in Pittsburgh. We hadn't talked to him since then. So, if I had to put a date on the last time we talked to him, it was probably the Wednesday or Thursday of that week. So it's been a long time.
All right. Well, obviously Chubb missed you guys, so that's good. And he misses being away from the fans. A big part of it talked about though just how much he loved being, back with the team and being out there to smash guitar and all that stuff. Just kind of fueled the fire. And the other thing too, Scott, that didn't he say he's just pumped about the contract, that he wants to be in Cleveland, right? That was another part of it.
Yeah, he said they could have hung him out to dry and just cut him, and they didn't do that. Now, they reduced his salary by a ton, but they gave him the opportunity to make it back in incentives. So he appreciates that. Yeah, he doesn't want to go anywhere. He likes being here. It'd be interesting to see, I don't want to get too far down the road, but let's say he gets back to being close to Nick Chubb. How do the Browns handle that contractually? Would they pay him long term? Would they pay him big bucks? They don't have to worry about this year, but that's something, to consider down the road. They can't pay everybody. They probably were getting away from paying running backs big money, given Deshaun Watson, given the Ken Dorsey wanted to spread things out. But he did appreciate that. He takes motivation from any doubters. He took comfort with the support of other NFL players across the league, family, friends, the fans, the support they showed him. He said he did his part when he broke the guitar or smashed the guitar before that Jets game. He said, "I told the guys, look, I did my part," and then they went out and did their part and won the game.
Yeah.
And then I did think it was interesting. He talked about being on the field to watch practice the last couple of days. And he said he needs to be around football. He goes, "It's been a long time since I've been around football." He goes, "I got to get in there." He's in the meetings, but I need to be out there on the field, seeing things, feeling football, because he needs to get back into it.
Yeah. And quickly on this so we can move on, but I just thought it was interesting. He said he did not think it was a dirty play. And, we both said that back when we talked about it. A lot of people thought it was, but he did not think it was.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That was the one other point I wanted to make. He said it wasn't dirty. He didn't think he meant Minkah Fitzpatrick of the Steelers. Didn't think he meant to do it. and somebody asked if Minka had reached out to him, and he said no. He goes, wait. He was on the field. He came up to me and said, I wasn't trying to hurt you, or I didn't mean to do that, or whatever. So, yeah, Chubb kind of dismissed the idea that it was dirty.
All right, let's get to the extensions now. Barry and Stefanski, we've been waiting kind of a long time on this, but, as we mentioned earlier, it was just a matter of when, not if. And, Scott, this is just something that does not happen often, though. That's kind of what makes this the big deal, right? Because we just don't see it often when it comes to head coaches and GMs with the Browns.
No, I mean, the last set to get the extensions were Phil Savage and Romeo Crennel in 2008. And then, kind of ironic, they never saw the extensions. Like they got them before the 2008 season, had a bad season. There was all kinds of issues off the field, and then they both get fired. Now they saw the money from the extensions, but they never reached the contracts ran out in 08. The extension started in 09. They never made it to 09 with the Browns. So, I think that just shows you where the state of the Browns were back then, right? Even when they thought they had stability, they didn't. These are the first extensions under the Haslams. Now, there's maybe Hugh Jackson, he said years after he got fired, he said there's a secret extension. It might have been more about picking up an option. But right? Remember that whole thing? But this is the first real extensions, and it's the first pair that get extended. And that's significant too, right? It's not just, okay, you got a coach you trust. It's you got a GM you trust, and you got a pair you trust. And how many times through all the dysfunction of this organization, Chud, have we seen coach and GM, kind of going at each other, right? There's been battles. There's been power struggles. We saw it with Phil Savage and Romeo a little bit. There was a little bit of a back and forth there where, maybe one would survive and the other one wouldn't. It really feels like Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are in lockstep and on the same page. And that's great for this organization.
Yeah, that was going to be my next quote. What does this mean overall for someone that's just casually looking at this? Overall, how big of a deal is this?
Yeah, I think it's especially big given the history that I just mentioned, right?
Right.
Guys get extensions across the league, right? But it speaks to how far the organization has come. It speaks to how far, I would say, even the Haslams have come. Now, Stefanski and Barry gave them reason to be patient, and they gave them reason quickly to be patient, right? They get hired in 2020. They go to the playoffs in 2020. So, how many times we talked about the Haslams having the quick trigger, right? And they just churn through coaches, churn through GMs. Stefanski and Barry, having the success they did right away, allowed the ownership to take a deep breath, right? And to settle in and not have to feel like, oh my gosh, it's not going to work with these guys. But then they missed the playoffs back-to-back years, right? And I think there's concern there. We don't know, the Deshaun Watson trade doesn't look like a great trade to this point, right? If you're just basing it on the return in his first couple of years here. So there were questions heading into 2023 about Stefanski and Barry, which is why the Haslams made no effort to have an extension before last season, which was fine. It made sense. There were 2 years left. But if they really were, if they really loved them, if they really wanted to erase those questions, they would have done so before last year. But they were coming off 2 losing seasons. We have the Watson thing, all that. And last year really allowed, I think, everyone to settle down inside the organization. They were able to establish themselves as, hey, we went to the playoffs. I'm speaking if you're Stefanski and Barry, playoffs 2 times in 4 years. This organization hasn't done that since the late 80s, right, with Marty Schottenheimer. So the fact that they were able to do it last year, especially under all those trying circumstances, right? We know the injuries. We talked about Chubb. Deshaun Watson gets hurt. You start 5 different quarterbacks. You win with 4 starting quarterbacks. To go 11-6, reach the playoffs, and play as well as they did, Andrew Berry had a deep enough roster that was able to make it work. Found Joe Flacco. Even if he came to him late, he found him, right? That speaks to Andrew Berry. And just in general, the roster has gotten deeper and more well-rounded with Berry. And then Stefanski was able to win despite all the injuries. He's the play caller in the head of that offense, and he won with PJ Walker. He won with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He changed the offense to win with Joe Flacco and have Joe Flacco playing great football. So last year, to me, cemented them and cemented their future. And if you're the Haslams, it was a no-brainer.
Scott, what's your take on this? If you don't want to get too deep in it, I understand, you're there every day, but, there were just, and I don't want to name any names, but throughout the years, whether it was a coach or GM, there's just guys that, I don't know, I just questioned, or maybe their character, or are they full of themselves, or I don't know. I don't want to bring, again, I just feel like these two guys, and tell me if I'm wrong, I get just a good sense that they're just good people. And I really enjoy listening to Barry, whether he gives you anything or not. I kind of trust the guy.
Yeah.
I think he's doing a good job. I don't think he's like a snake like maybe some others in the past have been. And I'm not saying anyone individual. And maybe I'm just making that up. I don't know. And I just think like Stefanski, what he's doing with this foundation, like, am I wrong to say like we just have good people in place?
I don't think you're wrong, Chud. I was cautioning somebody the other day, and somebody in the media. We just having somebody said, "Oh, he's a good guy," and you got to be careful when you say that, right? Because
yes,
you never really know, right?
Right.
So is that it being the all-time caveat? I would agree with you. I mean, I do. I just start with Andrew Berry. I think Andrew Berry is like an honest, like genuine guy. I've always gotten that vibe from him. He feels like he deals with me straightforward. He feels like he deals with everyone straightforward. He's incredibly smart. I think that's, early on, right? There's a lot of grief, these Ivy League guys, blah, blah, blah. And this isn't the only reason they've won, but I don't think you can dismiss the intelligence factor, Chud. I really don't. They're deliberate. They're deep thinkers, and this is Stefanski and Andrew Berry and Stefanski, right? Stefanski made a joke yesterday about, well, if Andrew were just a little bit smarter, and he's kidding because like he's incredibly smart. So I think that matters. I think that has an impact. And yeah, Stefanski, he's not the best quote, but I think he handles the media well. He doesn't snap at anybody, doesn't blow up with anybody, and we've had that in the past, right? I appreciate what he's doing with the foundation. I think that's a good cause. It's been there 4 years, and he's developed roots inside the community, and the foundation's part of it. And Mary Kay Cabot asked a question about, hey, you actually have your oldest is going to high school now, right? And this extension, maybe it takes him through high school, and you can't get too far ahead, right? Because you could get fired at any point, stuff could happen. But that's like the real world part of it, right? Is, he was from Philly, spent his whole life in Philly, right? Went to Penn, and then he spends all that time with the Vikings, and now it's Cleveland, and now you can forecast, you can look ahead and go, oh my gosh, maybe Stefanski and his family are here for a decade, right? That's obviously a long time. It's the kids get raised in a city that you weren't familiar with. Right. So I think you have all that. But yeah, I think just generally speaking, yeah, I think they are good people. And I don't think you're off base at all when you talk about issues in the past, right? There were plenty of those issues. There were plenty of people that I would not trust who've held those roles before. So yeah, I think that is a difference, John.
Yeah. How about the play calling? Let's keep this quick because we'll talk about this a lot, but one of the questions that was asked to him almost alluded to the fact that he had given it up, but I don't think that's exactly what was meant. But it was this kind of like a trick to get him. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. I do know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
It was almost.
Yeah, I don't know if it was
what happened there.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a trick question or the person asking the question was confused. Like the last two OTAs we've been at, practices, Dorsey's been the guy calling the plays. And you can tell because he's on the walkie-talkie telling the quarterback what the play is, right? but we're not at every practice, right? So Stefanski got asked about it well, maybe he didn't get asked about it at the golf outing. I thought maybe he did. But anyway, so yesterday I happened to pay attention. Monday he said he hadn't made a decision yet. So yesterday I happened to pay attention, and Stefanski is calling the plays in. So that's been a normal part of previous off seasons. They rotate who it is. Quarterback gets to hear different voices. You both get practice doing it if you're Stefanski or Ken Dorsey. In the old days, it was Alex Van Pelt. So I don't think there's been any signal from the 3 practices we've watched that it's going one way or the other. And I would say when I watch Dorsey, makes you think, okay, maybe Dorsey will be the guy. When I see Stefanski do it yesterday, it reinforced to me that he's certainly not giving it up completely, because if he's still doing it now, he's probably leaving the door open that he'll do it in the fall. And I would say that if he's doing it in May, odds are better that he's going to do it in September. So I never thought he was going to give it up. I'm not ruling it out, but I would still say my guess is he keeps the play calling duties.
Give us roll call. I don't think we need to get into this too much. We debated this a lot last week, but just, Myles Garrett was not there again. Who else was not there? Who was there? Anything important to note?
Yeah, most of the same guys weren't there. Myles Garrett, Amari Cooper, Juan Thornhill, Jerry Jeudy wasn't there. He was at the first week. I don't think he's been there the last 2 weeks. Or at least when we've been out there, he hasn't been there the last 2 weeks. Dalvin Tomlinson, Quentin Jefferson on the D line. They weren't there. Greg Newsome, Mike Hall Jr., Zadarius Smith had been there the first week, weren't there last week, were there again yesterday. David Njoku is another guy. He hasn't been there at all through the OTAs that we've seen. Now, he's got a celebrity softball game Saturday, so I expect to talk to him then. And minicamp is next week, mandatory minicamp, so all these guys should be here next week. And then it kind of goes to the back burner, right? But, a handful of your biggest players have not been at OTAs.
All right, let's get to our Deshaun Watson update brought to us by Petrak's Pebbles. Although I heard a rumor you had Chubb crunch this morning in celebration of finally hearing from him. So I don't know. I cannot confirm any of that, but I know how much you love both of those cereals. Anyway, I'm rambling. Deshaun Watson update.
Haven't talked to him. That should be next week during minicamp. I think that's part of the rules is that guys have to talk during minicamp. They have to be available to the media. So it's been since April. So really looking forward to talking to him. Just get a sense of where he thinks that shoulder is. Right, everything looks good, but I want to hear from him. Want to hear if he feels like in training camp he'll be 100%, or if it's still like a little bit of a ramp up period once you get to training camp. Does he feel any pain in there? Does he feel like he's letting it completely rip? Which, we've only seen him throw once because he didn't throw yesterday. He's still on it every other day. We talked about this last week, but the one time we saw him throw, that's the only thing missing was, okay, is he really trying to pump one in there? And, maybe he's done that, just not in front of us. So I'd like to get a little bit deeper from him there. Stefanski was asked Monday, okay, is Watson going to throw more in minicamp? And he wasn't ready to say that. He said, we're going to listen to the doctors. So that's going to be interesting. We're out there for all 3 days next week, get to watch the entire practices. Does he throw once? Does he throw twice? Does he throw all 3 days? Does he get into team drills? Because he has not done any 7-on-7s or team drills. All he's done is individuals and then the installation while they go through just the offense. And, the offense goes against a shell. It's no defense. It's maybe some coaches, just kind of his landmarks. And he'll make those throws, but on the days he's throwing, but he hasn't done any 7-on-7 yet. So, there's 2 more milestones. So there's minicamp and training camp. And if he doesn't do any of that in minicamp, it's not the end of the world, right? It's just giving him that extra 5 weeks till training camp. Now, if he does it in minicamp, then I think that's a great sign, right? That, okay, he's taken that next step. So, to me, that's, like it has been since the surgery, that's number one to watch next week. It's Watson throwing. Is he doing any more? And then it's, okay, how do these guys look? The guys just we haven't seen, right? How does Amari look? How does Myles look? And then, Amari Cooper, he's got an interesting contract situation, right? Does that have anything to do with why he hasn't been at OTAs? is because he doesn't have an extension and he's entering the last year of his contract.
All right. Do you think that we could go 3 downs with Scott Petrak and do it quickly? Like, can I put you on the clock?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I got 3 more topics.
Okay.
First one. We're going to do these in a minute each. 3 downs with Petrak. Let's talk kickoff. There's talking. I feel like we need to explain the kickoff to people. I know we've talked about it, but you got to see a little more of it, didn't you?
Yeah, but if I'm supposed to answer this in a minute, Chud, you're really putting me under the gun here. And we can get into this deeper down the road. We got a lot of time before the opener, or before preseason even. It's going to be completely different. The basics are the receiving team. They line up, most guys, 9 of the guys line up on the 35-yard line, or it's 8 or 9. 35-yard line. The coverage team is 5 yards away on the 40. Nobody can move on those lines until the ball is touched or lands, right? And then it becomes a free-for-all. So what the thought is because the players are there's only 5 yards between them, that it's going to look more like a play from scrimmage than the old kickoff where there's all kinds of space for guys to maneuver. You're running all the way down the field. So does it look more like a normal play from scrimmage? Naheem Hines said he thinks it's going to look like a screenplay with a bunch of bodies in front of you. So we got to watch him practice it yesterday for the first time. It's going to be interesting is who returns, because you could have a running back, you could have a receiver back there, and you could have some bigger names. We saw Cedric Tillman, the receiver, and Jerome Ford were returning kicks yesterday that I noticed. And then who's on each unit? And yesterday on the coverage unit, you saw a lot of linebackers, a lot of defensive backs, and a couple of defensive linemen, which you normally would not see on kickoffs because you want the ability to get off a block, right? That becomes more important when there's a bunch of bodies in a confined space. And then from a return perspective, a lot of tight ends, a lot of defensive backs, and you could even see a lineman or 2 there because it's the same thing, right? You have a confined space, you got a blocker, offensive line are your best blockers, right? So it's going to be interesting to see just which players are used.
All right, that was pretty rude of me to put you on the spot like that for a quick minute on that topic. You're right about that, but I think you did well, and we can talk more about that. But I think that helps. Next one is Batonio. He talked at the golf outing on Monday. I thought a couple interesting things there, just talking about how much gas he has left in the tank, and then also the schedule talk.
Yeah, he says he's feeling good, but last year was a tough one for him. He had the knee surgery, knee scope, that ended his snap streak. Missed the game because of it. He had back issues. He had one other. He had a high ankle sprain in the Houston playoff game, which he left the field and came back and was able to play. But then might not have been able to play in the playoffs after that because he was in a walking boot right after that. So he dealt with a lot last year, a lot physically, and his performance suffered. Still a Pro Bowler, wasn't an All-Pro. I think he's looking for a big bounce back this year. And we know how good a player he is. It's all about health. And can he stay healthy? And I think he's 32. At 32 years old, does that become a trend, right? Sometimes that does with players. Injuries start, and then it's hard to stop them. But he's been so durable, so good for so long. Maybe that was just a blip, and he's able to stay healthy and become, get back to the player he was even just in 2022 when, he's on the streak of making the All-Pro. So he talked about that. It's 1 year at a time for him that, he doesn't know. It's at year 11. He's going to take it 1 year at a time and then evaluate. And then the offseason program, Chud, NFLPA has a proposal. They want to get rid of, now players show up in April, or it's voluntary, but the offseason program starts in April, runs through minicamp in mid-June. They want to get rid of all that and just start training camp early, like end of June, early July, and have this big ramp up and kind of put all the offseason program into the beginning of training camp. And there's been feedback both ways. There's people that think it's good. Batonio said the science and the data show that players are better served that way. But it messes with the schedule, and I think some guys like the schedule the way it is. They like this 5 or 6 week break between minicamp and training camp, and it'll be interesting to see if the NFLPA backs off or they keep pushing and try to get this passed.
All right, and then you got a busy couple days ahead of you. You got the Keepers Foundation under the lights football tonight with Stefanski, and then you got the big softball game. Njoku, Travis Kelce's going to be there, and a lot of the big name players on the Browns, right?
Yeah. The Stefanski Foundation, his family, they found it. They began this foundation. They announced it within the last month, I think. This is the first event, and it's a flag football under the lights at the stadium. Talk to Stefanski, maybe talk to his wife. It's a family thing, and it's part of their commitment to Cleveland. They're going to be here. They're going to be in Northeast Ohio, so that'll be good. And then the Njoku softball game. I've covered these things, and they're weird. You never know who's going to talk. You never know who's going to show up. Right there, it looks like there's 50 guys that are confirmed. You've watched softball. There's like 20 guys on the field, right? So what are the other 30 guys going to do? So I don't think they're all going to show up. It'll be interesting to see who shows up. Travis Kelce, the captain's. It's because it's the captain's field in Eastlake. They tweeted out yesterday that Kelce's confirmed, and he's been to this before. Obviously, a Cleveland Heights guy, so that's a huge name. I mean, Josh Gordon's supposed to be there. I haven't talked to Josh Gordon since all the drama when he was here, right? Jacoby Brissett was here. They're supposed to be on this list. Jabril Peppers. There's some guys on this list. So it'll be interesting to see who shows up, who talks. Does Amari Cooper show up? He's supposed to be there. And so I don't know what's going to come of it from a media perspective, what I'm going to be able to write. But it's got the potential to be really interesting to see who winds up showing up at this thing.
Any chance that you'll suit up?
Well, I'll just say that my cleats and glove are always in my trunk. So that's
You'll be ready.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
My golf club. If they need somebody to play golf too, my clubs are always there too.
That's great. All right, nicely done. Well, that's it for me. Do you have anything else? Anything I missed, or anything you want to throw out there?
No, Chud, you actually hit every note that I had, but I did want just to Andrew Barry real quick on the extension. We talk so much about the stability and the continuity and to go into the playoffs 2 years out of 4, right? But from a GM, it's all about talent evaluation and talent acquisition. And it's been a little hit or miss, right? So it's interesting that he's got the extension, which I think is well-deserved, and that they've gone to the playoffs twice when it hasn't been perfect. Not that it ever is, right? But, he had some misses in free agency early. He had some misses in the draft early. Or at least some questions, right? Anthony Schwartz was a bust. I know he's a third-round pick, right? Maybe the jury's still out on Jed Wills. But I think the longer Andrew Barry's been here, we've seen fewer of those mistakes. You've seen patience work out with a guy like David Njoku, right? You gave him the extension. I'd question that. Njoku has his best year ever last season. Grant Delpit finally felt like he broke through last year. Jeremiah Russo-Koromo, the same thing. And we've seen he's been good trading, right? The Amari Cooper trade was a good trade. We'll see about Jerry Jeudy, but Cooper was a great trade. Dustin Hopkins before last year was a good trade. So I don't think it's been perfect from an Andrew Barry perspective, but I think we have seen growth in strides. And just when you step back and look at the roster, yeah, they're paying a ton of money. Yeah, they're, using all their salary cap. But, and we talked about this, the roster is on par with anybody in the league. And I guess that's a bottom line when you're talking about a GM.
Yeah, I mean, who cares? I'd rather them spend money and make the playoffs than have all this cap space and be awful.
Right. But, I just think it's interesting because for a while you look at maybe the biggest moves that he made, right? When he signed Austin Hooper in free agency, that wasn't a good move. John Johnson III wound up not being a good move. But I think there's been fewer of those misses. And even when he's missed, he's been able to cover up, right? They haven't drafted receivers well, but he traded for Amari Cooper, right? Well, we still got to see about Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy, but he's found other ways to figure it out. He's done a good job signing guys to extensions, right? The guards, Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, Nick Chubb, right? So, to me, it's been way more good than bad, obviously. But But it's interesting because a lot of times that's how we talk about a GM, right? Like we break down each move, and it just feels bigger to me when you're talking about Ingerberry.
Great point.
All right.
Well said.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for doing this as always. Chud, we're good here, huh? You're going to go enjoy your first day of summer vacation.
Yeah, exactly, man. Feel like a kid again, right?
Yes. Good for you, buddy. Go get some ice cream. That seems like something you do on the first day, right?
Well, it's funny because I always keep a ice cream scooper in my car. I'm not like you with the golf clubs, but I got the scooper ready to go.
Love it. Cool. Well, thank you, Chud. We'll do this again next week. We'll have we got 3 days of minicamp practice, right? So we'll have the Stefanski thing tonight. We'll have the Njoku celebrity softball game, and then we get 3 days of practice. So we'll figure out when we can do this next week, but we're going to have plenty to talk about again. And then there's a break. The Browns have a break, and I'll give Chud a break coming up after next week. All right?
That's so vacation after next week.
Vacation after next week.
Maybe I don't. Now, let me ask you this. If they mess with the schedule, how does that mess with our schedule? I got to look into that.
That's a great question. I don't know.
that
plays out.
My opinion on that schedule, well, it wouldn't affect me as much as it would affect you, obviously, the day-to-day. But that's something you got to look into.
I agree.
How that will affect you before you can give an opinion. But anyway, I look forward to that. So next week we'll have Stefanski talk one day. And it's 3 days, right? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Yep. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the players break. So we'll get some more assistant coaches talking next week. Stefanski, players. I expect Deshaun Watson to talk. So we'll have plenty to talk about.
Wow. So I better make sure I have room in my schedule next week.
Yeah. Figure out a time. We'll figure it out.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I hope everyone enjoys the I don't know, a lot of their kids that have already been out of school since last week. But I guess just enjoy the fact that we are now in not the official part of summer, but we're getting close to it. But it feels like it outside. It just got that good feel, right?
No doubt. Yep, we're in the summer. Yep.
All right.
Cool. Thanks, Chud. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.